Mr. Speaker, and to my friend from Missouri, thank you. Actually, sometimes I come behind these microphones and often what I want to share, what I need to share, it's my therapy, is a bit dour. And it's sometimes fun to listen to someone that actually has happy and joyous. All right, now that the uplifting portion of this program is over, let's get to the facts. Mr. Speaker, or now Madam Speaker Pro Tem, you see the number, 35 trillion. Guess when we hit it? We should be very, very excited and proud of ourselves. We did something that so many economists said we would never get to this quick. My math says this coming Friday, 3 p.m., the United States gross debt will cross over 35 trillion. Now understand, that's not the way Europeans calculate our debt, which they calculate our debt dramatically higher because of our obligated unfunded liabilities. But you're going to watch the Treasury Friday about 3 p.m. post up a number, $35 trillion. We did it. Congratulations. And how many people have you heard come find the microphone today or this week understanding, wanting to talk about that? What we've gotten is people coming behind the microphone and not telling the truth. We all want to protect Social Security. The way you protect Social Security is you know the math and how it actually works. We're on track in a decade to double senior poverty. But God forbid any of us tell the truth about math. Because the truth gets you unelected and a bunch of really angry ads at home. So this place runs around and avoids telling the truth. So let's walk through another little factoid. My math basically says this year, 45.68% of all the income tax collections, receipts, your government takes in just cover the cost of interest. I'd been coming behind the microphone and saying, hey, interest in 2024, this fiscal year, would be somewhere around a little less than 1.2 trillion. I apparently have that wrong. It's probably going to come in about $1,140,000,000 to $60 billion. Either way, I'm off a fraction. But 45.68% of every dime we're collecting in your income tax now just pays interest. And I've tried to say over and over and over at home and other places, and you get people to just stare at you and go, huh? Who really runs this government? Seriously, it's an honest question. I need you to think like adults. Maybe those who actually went to a finance class. Who actually now runs this government? I'm going to argue the debt markets, the bond markets from around the world. If you have to bring almost $10 trillion to market this fiscal year, $2.25 trillion virgin new issues because we're borrowing, it's like $75,000 to $80,000 a second right now, and the economy is good. The actual baseline data on GDP is good, and you're still burning almost $80,000 a second in borrowing. What happens the second you have a U.S. debt auction that's undersubscribed or there's not enough people there? What happens to U.S. interest rates? How much of the world goes into depression? But we're going to talk about that. Oh, God, no, because that would require math. That would require being serious. You know, we passed a bill here earlier today. I voted no on it. And look, they worked hard on it. They lowered the top line spending. But you got to deal with a really uncomfortable discussion. Every dime a member of Congress votes on is borrowed. Okay, let's process that. Every dime a member of Congress votes on is borrowed, and depending on some of the projections, about a quarter of Medicare. Social Security has its own trust fund. It runs out in like 9-10 years, and then we got to figure out what's going to happen there, and we can continue to get Democrats coming behind the microphone and lying about it. which makes it almost impossible to actually lay out the math and try to fix it. And remember, raising the cap, doing the Democrats' plan of $400,000 up and just raising the cap only covers about 38% of the shortfall. You had the president in that debate last month saying, if we just tax rich people 1% more, and I have a chart in here that will show it's a fraction of a fraction of a fraction of the shortfall. Remember, if you take $400,000 and up, the Democrats' definition of rich, and you tax them at 12.4%, you only cover 38% of the shortfall. So 1%, and this is the nature of our discussion. When every dime a member of Congress votes on is borrowed, is it moral to borrow money here to send it to entities around the country, even though their programs, many of them I love. I think they're the right thing. I just think the way we finance it isn't. Is it right to send them cash to that city, to that state, to that county, and they have their own taxing authority? They may have more cash in the bank than we do as a percentage. Do you borrow money? Because that's what we're doing today. We're borrowing money. And the crazy thing, when you do the adjustment for the ability for interest to be tax exempt from municipal debt, we have municipalities in this country that have a better credit rating, have a better credit rating than the United States. Remember, Greece can sell a 10-year bond cheaper than the United States today. We are number 14 on the credit stack, meaning there's 13 other countries that can sell a 10-year bond cheaper than the United States. And if you read the instruments, if you read the Moody's, the S&Ps, their documents and their reps and warrants and their analysis on U.S. debt, they don't trust this place. They do not believe Congress, particularly, because it's our job. We're supposed to be the adults in the room. We make policy. The White House carries it out. Remember that little thing, the Constitution? Maybe someone tried reading it. And they don't trust us. They don't, and they have no reason to trust us. How much discussion have you heard, anyone that's been listening to these microphones this week? Heard people like me, which maybe I'm just an idiot for actually giving a damn. Get behind these microphones and actually walk through the math and explain there's a way we keep our promises. There's a way we meet our obligation for the earned benefits. There's a way to make this work. You don't have a lot more time to keep screwing around, but if you do it in the next 3-4 years, this is another American century. I have my 8-year-old sitting over here. I also have a 2-year-old. My wife's exactly my age. Yes, I'm pathologically optimistic. The math says her generation will be the first generation to live poorer than her parents. Great morality, guys. Very proud of us. And anyone that listens to my diatribes here, thank you. I think this is almost like my therapy session, because I get angry all week long listening to absurdity and people saying things that mathematically have no basis in fact. 100% of the debt, and this makes everyone angry, and it's factual. 100% of the U.S. debt from today through the next 30 years is demographics. Huh? What's demographics? And this is your country's leadership. It's demographics. We got old as a society and we didn't set aside the resources to keep our promises. And since 1990, U.S. fertility has been falling. I won't use the word collapsing. But last year, we estimate 2023, 1.63%, maybe 1.62% fertility, meaning the United States now has fewer children than much of Europe. Now tell me how I build a pay-as-you-go system to keep our promises to those who paid into Social Security, those who paid into Medicare. And remember, the Medicare taxes you pay only cover about 38-40%. And there is, okay. Oh, what the hell? Why not we do this right now? Social Security does not add to the U.S. debt, technically. but the paying back the money that was borrowed from the Social Security Trust Fund does. So there's some $3 trillion some dollars that have been borrowed out. And for the last few years, every month, there's not enough tax collections coming in on the FICA tax at 12.4% to make the payments to Social Security recipients. So every month, I want you just to visualize this. Social Security says, hey, Treasury, I'm holding a bunch of your bonds. You owe us some money. And they cash them in, and Treasury goes and borrows money and pays interest for that borrowed money. So Social Security doesn't create the debt, but Treasury does, because Treasury has to go out and borrow money to pay back the money they've taken out of the Social Security Trust Fund. And if you add it all up, plus interest, and forgive me, I'm partially doing this off the top of my head, I calculate maybe $6 trillion. Three plus in principal, and then over the time the interest paid back is probably another 3. How many times have you had anyone just try to be honest about it? It's not Republican math, it's not Democrat math, it's just math to be avoided because we're terrified of our voters to tell them the truth because we've lied to them for so long. How many times have you had a Democrat go around here saying, if we just tax rich people more? I've done entire presentations here, and for those on the Republican side, if we just cut discretionary spending, well, damn it, I can come up with about $300 billion in discretionary can be cut down. They'll be screaming, but that's still 1% of GDP. And for the Democrats, every tax hike they genuinely propose that could be executed when you adjust it for its economic effects would be about 1.5% of GDP. So you got 1.5 there on tax hikes. You got 1% in cuts over here. Hey, it's a big 2.5%, right? Right? 2.5%. We're borrowing 7% of the entire economy this year. Great job, guys. And I guess part of my anger is I love some of the people I work with here. They're smart, they care, but they run away from me when they see me coming because I want to talk about this stuff. This chart is the pie chart of America's spending. Do you see this number? 74% is in the red. The red doesn't get a vote from a member of Congress. That is on autopilot. It's called mandatory. It's earned benefits. Some of the benefits you get because you're part of a certain tribal group or you fall below a certain income, but this is earned. You see the blue? It's defense and non-defense. Every dime in defense is borrowed. Every dime of what we call non-defense discretionary is borrowed. And a wedge of this over here is borrowed. And when you see over here, when we say net interest, I've tried to explain the net difference between net interest and gross interest. Net interest this year will be $892 billion. That's interest we pay to people out in the world. Your pension fund, a nice family on the other side of the world, the union retirement fund over here, they buy U.S. debt. The other debt is we owe to the trust funds. We've borrowed the money from the trust funds, but we still have to pay it back. We still have to pay it interest. So it's one of the great cons we do in our budgeting here is, well, its gross interest is only $890 billion, Schweikert. Why do you keep going around saying 1.2 trillion? Interest, just this year. It's because that other chunk of interest, we got to pay. And we're going to have to pay back the principal, just as I just did the explanation on how Social Security works. So once again, if you're a member of Congress and you're doing a town hall or putting out something and you're not showing this chart, you're not helping our brothers and sisters across the country understand how serious this election is, how serious putting people in office that stop pandering to your need for a dopamine hit in your brain, but maybe own a calculator. Once again, I can make this math work, but you don't pretend we can tax rich people. we can just cut our way there. You may have to do a bit of both of those. But it's policy. I've done presentation after presentation after presentation on how you could crash healthcare, how you could adopt artificial intelligence to reduce the size of this government dramatically and still have better customer service. How the mechanics of talent-based immigration could actually grow the economy, but shutting down the border, stopping importing competition to our working poor, making our working poor poorer. But you got to think like an economist, and the idiot, the folks here want to talk down to you, talk to you like you're a child, and say, well, if we just did this, we'd be fine. It doesn't work that way. We are now so upside down debt-wise that unless you do something it's holistic with lots of moving parts, none of the math works. And we're uncomfortable telling that truth. So let's actually walk through a board I don't think I've ever shown before. Fiscal year 2024. Here's sort of where we're at to date. We've taken in $3,755 billion. Do you see the red here? Okay, the red is the individual income tax. Your country is an income tax-based economic system, where other countries may rely more on a value-added tax, which is a really regressive tax, crushes particularly the middle class. The blue over here, when you start to look at that, this is functionally, we call it social insurance and retirement programs. It's Social Security. Well, that's actually going out the door immediately, and we have to borrow some to cover it. The blue over here, well, that's actually corporate income taxes. Remember, the United States, back in about the late 80s, early 90s, we changed much of our corporate tax structure when we started having pass-throughs. Do you remember LLCs, subchapter S's, partnerships, those things? So much of what is corporate activity in the United States flows through to that individual tax line. So when you get the brain trust here, it says, we're just going to raise corporate taxes. Great. Okay. And that's going to solve something? Remember, and we're trying to vet the paper I got the math from. But we have a paper from about a year and a half ago that said in the 2017 tax reform we did, 67% of the corporate tax rate reduction went to wages. So when you have someone from the left who runs around here saying, we're going to raise corporate taxes, ta-da, what they're doing is basically screwing over the working men and women of the country. That's how it works. When your wages go up, the old saying used to be it's inflation. Well, that doesn't get you anything. Or it's productivity. Because you built a tax code that said we can afford to buy the next better piece of equipment. We can build better processes. We can build better supply chains. We're becoming more productive, and you as a worker get part of that. But part of that productivity also is a tax system that maximizes economic vitality. Economic growth is moral. If you want to have fewer poor people in your society, if you want to close income inequality, you do it not through transfer payments. We have data over data over data. That many of the transfer payments at the end of the decade make people poorer because you disassociate them, their lives from being part of the society, part of work. So the secret is have an economy that grows, that needs them. Getting economics right is moral. But this is the reality. When you get people, when we start talking about, do you see these tiny little wedges there? Well, that's excise taxes. Some will think of it as tariffs. When you actually see some miscellaneous. Your society is functionally financed. Income tax, this is FICA, and this is corporate. Mark my words, and I'll probably be long gone from this place. What the Democrats are doing, policy-wise, and honestly, the Republicans' unwillingness to actually do tough things, into this decade, you're going to all be having a discussion of having a national VAT, value-added tax, just like the rest of the world. And all the crap discussion of, well, not progressive enough. It's regressive. It hurts working men and women. Working men and women get their heads kicked in because it's the only way you can start to confiscate enough resources from people. So let's actually talk through, let's knock down some of the craziness that keeps being said around here. This is a brand new chart for me. U.S. fiscal dynamics, now and then. And we're going to go way back. Let's actually do the previous from 1984 to 2023, and then current. Our tax revenues are up. We're taking in more receipts. Technically, they're not revenues. Revenues are what you earn. Receipts are what you confiscate. So just a bit of tax lingo there. But it's our spending. You see tax receipts are up, but our spending is way up. And when you see the white line over here, deficits, it's just basically the derivative of, hey, tax receipts are up, but we're spending faster than those receipts are going up, therefore you get a deficit. If you get someone who says, well, those 2017 tax cuts, no, tax receipts are up. I have another chart I'm going to show you here. Corporate tax rates, or corporate tax collections, don't think about the rate, it's about what you take in, are actually above the mean. And how much of this spending is the Orwellian named Inflation Reduction Act? So the Democrats lost their mind when we did 2017 tax reform. Remember, it was actually a few $1 trillion, $5.5 trillion. But functionally, 4 of it were also covered, direct taxes. We just moved things around to maximize productivity. It was about getting companies to move back to the United States, move their organizations, their intellectual property, the things they were making money on, get them back to the United States. We had to become competitive in the world again. The other $1.5 trillion, well, that's actually, the Democrats, that's the driver of the debt. No, it's not, because it turns out it wasn't $1.5 trillion. The latest data is almost $900 billion of that has been covered by the economic growth. Yet, when the Democrats controlled this place in the last session, they dropped $2 trillion in subsidies, handouts to big business. And all that's borrowed money. How many people, when was the last time you had a reporter that actually covered any of this fairly? When was the last time you met a reporter that owned a calculator? The public has no understanding what's going on out there. And I keep trying to provide this chart over and over. This is U.S. government revenues. The sign should say receipts. This is mislabeled. Green, individual income taxes. Remember, we're mostly an individual income tax country. When you see spikes like this is the dot-com bubble of functionally 1999 or 2000, 2001. The dot-coms, that's capital gains. Here, this spike here, that's actually functioning people were getting lots of COVID money. So it was direct spend from the federal government. We borrowed it, gave it to them. They had to pay taxes on it. This line here, the blue, that's FICA taxes. That's your Social Security, that's your Medicare. Very stable. Down here, this is corporate taxes. Do you see the line? Remember, this is the regime of the new corporate tax rates since 2017. Tax receipts, the actual tax dollars are up. And it's above the mean of the last couple decades. You need vitality. You need dynamism. And there's lots of things we could do policy-wise. The United States is becoming a bit more oligopoly. Many of our businesses are becoming far too big and far too protectionist. But that's government. Government likes big organizations because they're easier to manipulate to get them to do what they want. Hey, here's a subsidy. Wink, wink, nod, nod. Engage in our social policy. Engage in our political policy. And we're going to hand you billions. Instead of what you do when you do tax reform of everyone, knife fight. Battle it out. The best product, the most dynamic company, the one that moves fastest, the most innovative wins. That's the way an American economy, a market economy is supposed to work. Instead, now you have and you'll actually have our brothers and sisters on the left here actually go behind these microphones and use Our industrial policy is this. Our planned economy is this. God, I keep waiting for them to build a 5-year plan and hold up the little red cards. You don't get that reference, go look it up. So, this is the driver of the debt. Remember how I showed you tax receipts are up, but our spending is up more? Well, where's that spending? It's in what we call mandatory. In many ways, this isn't Republican or Democrat. It's what we are as a society. We calculate in about 10 years, 23% of our population will be 65 and up. But the politics will weaponize that very sentence I just gave you, but it's math. It's what we are. It's demographics. We're having dramatically fewer children than have for the last couple decades, and we got older. If we tell the truth about that, we can look at what is the cost driver. So when you get folks that come and say, well, almost all the cost driver is interest and healthcare costs. And a decade from now, when the Social Security Trust Fund is gone, do we backfill it? So the brain trust here will say, well, let's do this. We'll do the ACA, Obamacare, or the Republican alternative, or Medicare for all. Those are financing bills. Once again, if our body here would tell the truth, that's who gets subsidized and who has to pay. They don't change what we pay. Technology, cures, disruptions, better ways to do it. But we keep much of the technology that could crash the price of healthcare here, we keep it illegal. Because there's armies of lobbyists in our hallways who don't want to compete against your ability to use technology to keep yourself and your family healthier. I've been able to attach a handful of AI and algorithm bills to provide customer service at the IRS or the VA or other things. And the hate we've gotten from the government employees unions, from these. But the fact of the matter is, it's moral. It would be better customer service for our constituents. It would be faster, better, cheaper. And the fact of the matter is, there's no pension with it. There are solutions that's not tax or cut and burn. It's a policy. And this place won't engage in the policy because we're afraid of the... We are protectionists. We are protections of the government bureaucracies and the incumbent business models. Is that Republican or Democrat? It's math. Oh. Yeah, I'm not going to bother you with that. Madam Speaker Pro Tem, may I ask how much time I have?
Gentleman has 23 minutes remaining.
All right. And for those who are trying to take down my words, I'm sorry for talking so fast. Tax revenues projected billions of dollars. I'm just, once again, want to make the point. Individual income taxes projected to be up dramatically. Payroll taxes up fairly substantially. Corporate income taxes fairly healthy, just that they're staying within. Other types of receipts are also up. But where I really want to get back to is trying to make this point, and then we're going to do some actual tax history. This is from CBO, Congressional Budget Office. This is not Republican or Democrat, it's math. 100% of the next 30 years of debt, healthcare and interest, and then in 10 years if we backfill Social Security. The rest of the budget is calculated to have almost $9 trillion positive balance. So when was the last time this place actually was willing to have one of the most difficult discussions? About a month and a half ago, the joint economic economists on the Republican side took the leap and told the truth. We wrote a detailed report about demographics, tax policy, maximizing economic growth, and then we talked about health. And this is where I get the crap kicked out of me, telling the truth. Obesity in the detailed line item, and we spent months and months and months and months working on these numbers and vetting them, could be as high as $9.1 trillion of additional healthcare costs over the 10 years. Having a society where we're about to have the 5th year in a row where prime-age males are dying younger, is that moral? Having a society where we calculate in 3 to 4 years, 50% of America will be obese. Is that moral? What we do in the Farm Bill, what we do in nutrition support, and what we do in trying to have a healthier society, is that Republican or Democrat? I often accuse my Democrats of wanting to engage in policy to maintain people's misery, where those of, at least myself, I want to cure the misery. I want to end the misery, cure diseases, move the types of investment, but also the policies so the FDA can use technology to bring cures to market faster. We have a whole portfolio of these ideas. Not one of those was a tax, not one of those was a major cut. We calculate that 16% of all U.S. healthcare, $600 billion, is people not staying on their statin or taking their insulin properly, or their calcium inhibitors, so they're having a stroke. So 99-cent pill bottle cap that beeps at you. And I can't get a damn hearing on that for years. Simple ideas that could crash the price of healthcare. Our society is dying. In 15 years, we calculate we have more deaths than births. Oh, but that doesn't work in the next election. That's not what I'm going to use in my propaganda. The attack ads that are going to come at you, Schweikert, well, we're going to say you mentioned the word Social Security and Medicare, but we're going to lie that you're one of the few idiots here trying to find a mathematical way to save it. This place is absolutely immoral. Oh, I've done this before. I've tried to walk through the actual cost to the poor on what we're doing at our border. I'll do this quickly. You're the individual, you're the couple. You didn't finish high school. What you sell is your talents. You're willing to go out and hang drywall. You work yourself off as hard as you can. And then you get a White House that engages in border policy where millions of people with the same skill set as you have come in and they consume the housing stock. So you want to know why the lowest tiers, the least expensive housing has had some of the highest inflation, why they can't find a place to live, and now their wages are going down because you're competing against millions of people with the same skill set. The cruelty of the current border policy crushes the working poor. Can we have a discussion like economists instead of, well, you're immoral, you want to, no. And on the flip side, we have entire charts that talk about a talent-based immigration. And talent could be a skilled carpenter or a synthetic biologist, grows the economy. And I will argue a number of the economic policies I propose, I cannot make work math-wise unless we actually. Because in the 70s, 80s, the world fought for hydrocarbons. Last decade, we fought for rare earths. I can build you the math model that says this decade and the next 3 decades, we're going to fight for smart people. The entire world. We educate people here and then we send them away. Are we out of our minds? Madam Speaker Pro Tem, I'm going to skip a bunch of the boards and just try to close this out with just a couple more. This is 2023. Total outlays, total spending, 6.1 trillion. Total receipts, 4.4 trillion. So what is that? 1.7 trillion borrow. This year, borrowing is going to be about 2.25. And this is a time where the economy is doing remarkably well. Now it's subsidized, so it's basically a sugar high, but it's still doing well. And now our problem is, in 2023, gross interest was about $700 billion. This year we're heading towards $1 trillion, $140, $160 billion. But this differential here, almost every dime of that 1.7 trillion borrowing, the growth on it. Now, much of it is Inflation Reduction Act, the shortfall from tax reform, but we've never been given the run to show how it's growing tax receipts. And I've shown you even corporate tax receipts with the different rates are up. Turns out it's healthcare and interest now. And now as we're moving back to more normalized interest, how many of you live in a fantasy world where you think interest rates are going back to zero? You realize the current interest on 10-year notes still aren't at historic norms when you take away the years of suppression on the rate. And for my brothers and sisters on the left who like to say, well, it was you gave away to rich people. Today, the rich, as defined by you, pay a higher percentage of federal income taxes than they did before. The Republican tax reform was more progressive than the previous tax code. And when we get to some of the other charts, here's my chart showing that President Biden in the debate said something insane about covering Social Security. Let's see if I can find 10 years gross debt will be $56.8 trillion. But here's one of the points I desperately want to make. Historically, when we've had very high marginal rates, we get 17.6, 18, 18.2% of GDP in taxes. When we've had very low marginal rates, we get 17.6, 18.2% of the economy in taxes because the economy changes and grows. So when you look at it, the black line is receipts, revenue. The line above it is interest and healthcare. So when our friends keep saying, well, we're going to tax the rich more, great, but I've already shown you if every tax worked absolutely to its maximum efficiency, you get 1.5% of GDP, and we're borrowing 7 this year. Oh. We'll make this the last one. Until we're actually willing to first have the same definitions of here's the drivers of debt, here's the innovations we're willing to bring into our society. This is our future. Our future is just absolutely crushing. And it's percentages of GDP. We expect Social Security and Medicare outlays as we start to head to the 30-year budget. 17.6% of the entire economy, where revenues are 6.3. Okay, no one has any idea what you're talking about. But my basic point is, today through the next 30 years, it's demographics. It's mostly healthcare, and then the cost of financing that shortfall. Helping people live longer, live healthier, live freer of disease is moral. Is it Republican moral, Democrat moral? It's just moral. And yet, every piece of legislation I've brought here over the last few years can't get a hearing or gets shot down because the bureaucracy despises it. The interest groups care more about their money than they care about my 8-year-old's future. There is a path where the math can be made to work. But for everyone around here, you think there's a simple solution. My father used to have this great solution, saying, for every complex problem, there's a simple solution. That's absolutely wrong. We will have to do complexity to save our future, save my retirement, save my children. We have put it on paper. We've done economic modeling. We've had multiple PhD economists do the math. There's a way it works. will this place step up and buy a calculator, put batteries in it, and then sit down with those of us who want to save our future and make this another American century? But we run around terrified from doing what's hard. Madam Speaker, thank you for the therapy session of letting me vent. I'm going to bite my tongue from saying what I had to say, but I am going to throw one last thing. There's a number of people watch these presentations on YouTube. Half the comments are bots. They're fake. They're Russian troll farms. Half the remaining half are people who care more about saying ideological insanity. But there's about a quarter of them that help, that actually have sometimes brilliant ideas, are engaged in saying, what if you did this? What if you looked at that? We're diving into ideas on things of consolidation, things of mandatory, and those ideas actually came from the population that's been willing to watch these presentations over the years. And one of my last great hopes is when I would do these economic presentations 5 years ago, I get 12 people that would watch them. Today, I'll have several 100,000. Maybe, just maybe, our Democrat, our Republicans, the people who are independent are tired of being treated like children, and they're ready. They're ready for us to start talking to them like honest brokers of policy. And with that, Madam Speaker, I'm going to yield a couple minutes to Congressman Mooney, and he can consume what time I have left.